lost her mind. I don't know how else to say it. We're LDS. She thinks she's a resurrected being and a god.
This is Charles Vallow, Lori Vallow Daybell's former husband.
I can't get in touch with my kids.
He's captured on police body cam video on January 31st, 2019, less than 6 months before he was shot and killed.
Why don't you come over here?
In this new video, 2 Arizona police officers respond to Charles' home. He tells them that he has just returned from a work trip in Houston to find that he is locked out of his house, his truck is missing from the airport, and his kids are not answering the phone. He blames his wife.
Today she said with Gabe on the phone, come take the kids. I don't care what happens to them. Come take them.
Charles voices concern about the statements Lori has been making.
He said, you're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now with my powers.
Those words haunting now as Charles is shot and killed just a few months later by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Cox calls 911 himself to report the shooting.
911, where is your emergency? I got in a fight with my brother-in-law and I shot him in self-defense.
It's July 11th, 2019. Cox asked for police and paramedics.
Okay, what part of his body is injured?
In the chest.
I'm sorry, where?
In the chest.
Okay, is he awake and responsive or unconscious?
Unconscious.
Okay, is he breathing?
I can't tell.
When police arrive, they ask Cox what happened.
How did it get to this?
I don't know, he was enraged.
What's going on? What happened?
Oh, he was talking with my sister earlier.
No, what happened today, though? Like, just in the last 20 minutes.
He came at me with a bat after he'd already hit me in the head, so I shot him to stop him.
Okay, and then what happened?
That was it.
Then, in December, Cox dies too. The medical examiner finds his death is due to natural causes. But on this January night, as Vallow is seeking police assistance in entering his home, his wife Lori has had her own interaction with police earlier that same day. This blurred police body cam video shows Lori reporting that her husband Charles has stolen her purse.
He's mad because I took the money out of our account. It's a joint account, so he wants me to give him money.
That's Ty Lee, Lori's missing daughter, sitting next to her mother. Lori is telling the officers that she and Charles have been fighting.
I caught him cheating, and I had evidence, and I told him about it. And he travels a lot for business, so I told him about it. I told him not to come home, and that his stuff would be gone, and that his car would be gone, and I was so he's a little mad.
Lori appears to have made good on her ultimatums. And sure enough, Charles returns home to find his stuff gone. He laments to officers about his predicament.
I love her to death. This is killing me, officer.
Oh, I can understand.
Our 13th anniversary is next month. We've been at a great marriage. All of a sudden, the last month, it just blew up.
The next day, Charles Vallow filed for divorce. And several months later, Tylee and her brother JJ go missing. Lori Vallow is refusing to tell authorities where her children are and is sitting in jail in Rexburg, Idaho, facing charges of child abandonment.
Who knows where she's at? We don't know where she's at. She has the right to take the children. You weren't home at the time, so she's in her legal right to do so.
That's amazing, this video. So many things, so much insight into Lori Vallow through Charles, his own words. But how about there? She has the right to take the kids. Wow. All right, let's bring everyone back in. Chanley, you know, putting this whole thing together, so many different pieces, but they're starting to fit together. And I think through Charles's words, his own voice, we're getting a much clearer picture of this relationship and Lori Vallow Daybell's, I don't know if it's a breakdown or attitude about what was going on.
It's an inside glimpse, his raw emotion. In fact, this is really the first time we see and hear from Charles Vallow, who arrives home. He can't get in his home. His truck's not at the airport. He's under a lot of stress, and he's just really lamenting to the officers who respond the entire story, giving us insight into what Lori Vallow has said to them, sort of a timeline even of events leading up to that day, January 31st of 2019. And I have to say that I spoke to his sister, Kay Woodcock and Larry just a few moments ago, and they are glad that this body cam video is out there because they say that was Charles. He doesn't raise his voice. He's very intelligent, they say. He's someone that's able to put out a fire, communicate, and he does so in a way that's not violent. He said they didn't have a violent bone in his body. He also went on to say, you know, we refer to the self-defense encounter with Alex Cox. He said, if my brother had a baseball bat, you can see how athletic he is in that video. Alex Cox would not have been able to grab a gun and fire back. He would have been knocked out. So they are pleased that this video has been released.
Ashley, one of the things that stuck out to me was a comment, Charles, saying that Lori doesn't care what happens to the kids. Wow.
Boy, I'll say. I mean, to me, that was the shocker. You know, if he's to be believed, he said right there with the responding officers, and I'll reread Chandley's report here. Today, she said, come take the kids. I don't care what happens to them. Just take them. So I'm astounded that the officer said what he said later. She's within her legal right. You weren't here. No. If you go on a business trip, it doesn't mean your spouse can just abscond with your kids. Yeah, I mean, she can go to the grocery store, she can go visit mom and dad, you know, that kind of thing. But you can't just leave and take children away from their father. And he was an adoptive father. So the whole thing is really disturbing. I think also, Vinny, the very disturbing part of that is this notion that he said, my wife said, I can murder you now with my power. She used the words murder, according to Charles. That should have been a big orange blinking light in the police report that husband says wife threatened him with murder. Those are serious words.
Yeah, Julie Grant, unfortunately, all this stuff seems to come true. I don't care what happens to the kids. I can murder you. Charles is dead. The kids are missing.
Yeah, if she can murder Charles Vallow with her powers, I certainly hope that law enforcement will use their powers to charge her with homicide here, because they can use these words. These are powerful words that can potentially come in as evidence, too, depending on how the prosecution constructs this, and certainly depending on whether charges are ultimately filed for any homicides here. But to me, Vinny, this just tells me she is sick, and not in the sense like she deserves an insanity defense because she doesn't know or doesn't understand what she's doing. No, I think it's very evident she understands exactly what she's doing, and sick as in narcissistic and a master manipulator. She said she didn't care about those kids, and we see tonight, where are your kids, Lori Vallow? You don't care, you told us.
And despite all this, Ted, Charles Vallow saying, I love her to death. I love her to I don't understand what was going on in this relationship, but I guess from his perspective, they had spent more than a decade together, and then all of a sudden, there's a change.
Yeah, and he says it was just last month, right? So what happened last month? It's Chad Daybell, and I want to know who is leading who here, and could down the road, I know Julie is saying there's no insanity defense, but if I'm her lawyer, I am going to blame this whole thing on Daybell, say that you were under his spell and he brainwashed you. There's no other way out, because she basically, we are hearing from Charles Vallow exactly what happened. She went off her rocker. She believes she's a god, and she doesn't care about her kids. She thinks that he's been possessed. This is unbelievable video, because we're hearing him speak from the dead, basically getting into his world at this time. It's disgusting, and you just feel for this man. The fact that he ends up dead is absolutely horrific. It's Chad Daybell, I guarantee you.
Chanley, so how much of an investigation is taking place right now, do we think, down in Gilbert, Arizona, for the death of Charles Vallow? Because we know the man who called on that 911 call you played for us is dead. Alex Cox, the one who says he actually shot and killed him. But now we've got Charles Vallow saying that Lori said she could murder him. He ends up dead. It's her brother.
Exactly, and we know that it is an ongoing investigation. They aren't giving a lot of details right now because it is it's an open case and an investigation. But just a month or two ago, the police department there releasing a statement saying that Lori Vallow is their strong investigative lead now in this case, that they are looking at her for possible charges in the death of her husband, Charles Vallow, there in Arizona. And I know that this key body cam video, as well as other evidence that we played, the 911 video, everything is being considered there. She's also under investigation, of course, in Idaho as well for the death of Tammy Daybell, her now husband's wife, who died last fall. So a lot of investigations going on in different parts of the United States.
Yeah, Ashley, I want to go back to Ted's point where Ted was laying out really probably is the best defense strategy that she could have, but it would pit Lori Daybell against Chad Daybell. And right now they have the same lawyer, by the way, but I don't know if that will ever happen. Do you think that will ever happen in this case, that one would turn against the other?
I mean, maybe once you start realizing when, what gets real, that does happen. Lovers have turned on lovers. Families have turned on families. Casey Anthony turned on her father. I mean, yeah, that stuff happens. However, I do think what's really critical here is to look at some of the evidence in the case that pertains to what Charles said. I mean, there's just so many cases. I mean, there's so many investigations, but I'm still really kind of hanging on Charles' words where he said, once again, she said, now I can murder you with my powers. We've covered these cases before where dead people say things about people who are being investigated for potentially killing them. They don't always get into court. Sometimes they're called dying declarations. It's usually said while you're dying, he did it, he shot me, and I'm dead. Those are dying declarations. They are admissible. But the farther away you get from dying, from the statement that was made about you dying at someone's hands, I hope this isn't too complicated, the harder it is to get into court. This is slightly different because it's actually police evidence. It's a body cam. So I don't know, Vinny, you think this through, right? Is there a chance that that never sees the light of day in any courtroom because it's not a dying declaration? She can murder me with her powers. He's not there to cross-examine. And you have a constitutional right to cross-examine those who make accusations against you.
Yeah, I mean, it's hearsay. The question is there an exception to get it in? Prosecutors will, I think, try to, if we ever get to that point of a case in a trial, and the defense will, I mean, they will pound the table to keep it out. We'll see what happens with that. Unbelievable developments tonight.